talk will know that I'm scattered and unstructured. So I'm hoping that folks will just like help me along here and tell me what it is you want to know and get me started and get me going. What I'd like to do in general today is talk about metalworking technique as it applies to armor making. But you know, that obviously covers kind of a broad range. And so tell me what you're interested in.
Triangular rolls.
Triangular rolls. People want to see triangular rolls? Okay. Here's what I was hoping for in an ideal universe, but it didn't pan out. I was hoping to like grab some of Patrick's cast-offs to throw rolls and stuff on, but he didn't have any cast-offs. Anybody got any like half-finished project they don't care if I put a roll on? No.
I'd like a round roll on one.
No,
that's stainless, man.
Yeah.
That's stainless. Okay. So I don't have a piece that's like half finished to put a roll on, so we're just gonna have to make one. All right.
Start out by doing some shaping.
Okay, yeah. So that's the upshot. We're gonna have to fall back to triangular rolls once we have a form to put a triangular roll on. So raising. Okay, we want to see something about raising. I pretty much always raise. I mean, that's not really true, but I pretty much always raise. Let's start with that.
Like a pinaquise?
All right. That'd be great.
You're happy to roll. Sure. Do a round roll on the edge.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to want to do here is talk about very shallow shapes. Because nothing is flat. Are we on the same page with the idea that nothing is flat? There are no cylinders in armor. There are no flat surfaces. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that cylinders and flat surfaces look like hell. The other is that cylinders and flat surfaces are very difficult to achieve. The third is that we're talking about handwork, in a day before rollers and machines, which has two implications. One is that nobody expects to see stuff that's flat. Nobody would want to see a thing. Nobody expects to see a thing like that. We live in an age when our products come from big machines, and flat is flat, and shapes are, round is perfectly round. Nobody expected that. It's handwork. It's hard to achieve. Material are working with inconsistent thickness. You can't even just run it through a roller and get it flat. So nothing is flat. And aesthetically, flat surfaces look bad. They look bad even when they're flat. And it's so difficult to make them flat that they always look bad because they're not quite flat. So what I'm going to do here is just like sketch out a. Has anybody got? No, I was thinking that template I made up yesterday in yesterday's class. You got a sketch of that, right? But it's just a sketch, so I can sketch it just as easily. You got the link? All right. Ooh. Now we're just gonna take a lane. Well, I hope that I'd made a somewhat cleaner version, but I'll trim that up a little bit. Okay, so if we make the somewhat presumptuous assumption that this is really a knee lame, and now I'm going to get my sous chef to cut this out while I continue to yammer. Monsieur? Merci. This is great to have like somebody do this. In point of fact, I don't even own one of those machines, right? I don't even know how to use that thing. I cut everything with a jigsaw. Is that barbaric?
That's pretty barbaric.
Is that barbaric? No. So what is what does that tell us? What does that tell us?
How to use the least of it.
It's not the tool, it's a technique. Well, that's one thing it would tell us. might it tell us that the much maligned saw actually works?
Oh, I know it works. It's just not very. It throws stuff in your eyes.
Okay.
So
I'll tell you.
what saw do you use?
I mostly have what's it? It's an old. It's a DeWalt.
Okay.
With an orbiting blade. The orbiting blade is key.
Yeah.
Got to have the orbiting blade.
What
Get
do you
the
use as the blade?
Get the skinny ones, not those fat wide ones which cut like son of a bitch in a straight line but won't go around corners. And get a blade with fewer teeth than they recommend. The metal thickness suggests you should have 32 teeth. You want 18. You want each of those teeth to be a freaking chisel, just like pull out metal. The other ones cut too slowly, they overheat and they die. But with the orbital blade, you can go pretty fast, especially when they're sharp, and you can go around corners a lot tighter than this machine. Thank you, sir. A lot. You can get down in these notches a lot better. You can cut it out. You can cut a 90-degree outside corner if you're willing to whittle. We don't have a means of taking edges off, do we? Oh, right.
We're gonna file it.
Okay. All right. So here's our lane. In an ideal universe, so you've got your lane traced around it. You take your saber saw and you cut away the line.
Yeah.
The thickness of the blade, the thickness of the line, just cut that bad boy away. Why? Well, because I'm anal retentive and I like my starting piece to really actually look like my template. Now, if I was going to do this for real, my template would be smoother than this because that was just like something I rough cut on the fly and didn't really refine. The other thing I would be doing, I got some hole locations marked here, and I would center punch. Do we have center punch or no? No, center punch.
Hugo, quick. Mark, get your punch.
Oh, yeah.
Do you?
I got my chisels with me.
Yeah.
Maybe got an actual center punch on me.
But what if we just like punches nothing but a canvas all at once, right?
That'd be cool.
Thank you.
You're too late.
And a hammer, I assume.
I know, not
Yes.
see if I actually had it.
Anyway,
Here it is. Japanese.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to mark these locations because these locations have carefully come off the template, right? And we know that these locations are in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have to mark them deeply. In fact, just on a lark, right in the middle here, I'm going to make a mark, just like barely noticeable, but we'll still be able to find that mark later. And if that's really where I wanted that hole, I mean, it isn't, of course, I could find that mark later and reinforce it and make it deep enough that I could actually punch it. But my point there is that even the lightest of center punch marks will not get lost below. It's light enough you can pretend it's not there when you're done if it wasn't where you wanted it. So we're going to shape this thing.
Can we file that first?
If you can stand there like run file across those edges so I don't cut myself to ribbons, that'd be great. If I had my druthers, I'd begin by taking off the worst of those edges, and then the edge that was going to be the outer edge, let's say that's an upper knee length, the one that was going to be presented to the eye of the public and the public's eye, would be chamfered off. Before I did anything, I'd chamfer it off. And if I screwed up that chamfer with a hammer, I would dress it up later. But I want to have that off of there just like from the get-go. Not just a exposed edge. Well, I'm starting with exposed edge. Not just the ideal thing is not just a 45-degree angle, but a kind of a parabola. So we'll make a quick approximation of parabola on the grinder. Fly it across the grinder, fly it across something with a little bit lighter wheel just to take the edges off so I don't abrade my fingers while I'm working. The inner edge, which is going to be presented to the wearer's leg, gets the same treatment. Now, this treatment on the outer surface of flames is almost universal in armor. This treatment on the inner surface happens on some of the nicer armors, but it's not as common as one might hope. You do see it. I use it all the time because it's kinder to the wearer's clothes in person. And I like the insides of my armor to be like smooth and not catch on things. They didn't seem to be as concerned about that as I am in general. Although I would say some nicer armor, the insides are finished that way. But I would take those edges off, you know, the outer edge the public sees, the inner edge the wearer feels, those would be off. The corners would be rounded enough that they're not dangerous, but not rounded enough that they look round. Just like take the stabby parts off anything that looks like you would stab yourself. Because I don't want to bleed on this. I'm going to bleed on it, but I don't want to. I want to forestall that inevitability. I'd only like to bleed like once per project and not once per day.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's good. It's good. I mean, this one gets rounded anyway because this one gets hidden under the wing. This is an inside corner. This one should be a little sharper because it should look sharp, but this is good. It's all right. Nothing is flat. Everything has a little bit of shape. So let's begin by giving us a little bit of. I'm gonna put some earplugs in, so I'll probably shout like a deaf man, but that won't hurt nothing.
Anyone?
This will do. I got back at home. I got a hammer. It's about this weight as my grandfather's. It's a nice old hammer from the 50s, and I use it for so much you can't believe it. It's just like a stupid-looking ball-peen hammer. I put a new handle on it 25 years ago. It's about this weight, and I do a lot with it. Is it the right hammer for the job? No, but it works. This one's a little bit sharp in the corner for this kind of work. The curvature of the face, which is to say almost nothing, makes it a good sort of utility hammer, but having the corners broken off and rounded off more would be better, because like everybody screws up and puts the corners in eventually, and you don't want every mistake to be something you have to deal with. So, for the center, we can do this by hand. I got a little too aggressive with it, put a kink, it'll all come out in the wash. The very ends, of course, we got to use a hammer to coax them down, because like nobody's hands are strong enough to do that. And if they are, I don't want you to prove it. Okay. Just keep that to yourself. So I got too aggressive with this and got some pink. This is not 1050. This is mild, isn't it? Is it 1050? It's sort of thinking like it's mild. Yeah, well, it probably is, and I'm just out of practice. I'm having performance anxiety. Okay, so ultimately, the first approximation here is going to be a cylinder and not some tapered cone thing. At the moment, we got some tapered cone thing. So I'm going to mess with this, put it on the horn at an angle, coax it, twisting the ends back to where they should be. But I'm not going to get too carried away with this because it's about to see some more violence. But I want the starting shape to be in the ballpark before I do anything. All right. Aside from this terrible kink that went in there too early on, this is a reasonable approximation of a knee length, right? It's not oversized. It's not unreasonable. Wrong side. But it's flat. Nay, it's worse than flat. It's anti-plastic because the edges are reflex, because that's what happens when you bend it. There's a name for that effect, but I forgot it. But you know the one, right? You bend the thing and the edges come up, which is exactly the opposite of what you want. So we got it, at a minimum, we have to get rid of that. But realistically, we also have to give it a slight curve so that when the armor is flexed, it looks nice to the eye. And also that slight curve will give a little bit of clearance for the next lame or the cannon of the limb to work underneath. It turns it into kind of a mini cop, but really, really mini, okay? So we need a hammer that's going to get in here. This one tic-tacs, so that ain't it. That ain't it either. This one's really too round for the job. That tic-tac, it's too round for the job, but it'll do. This will have to do. If I had like the hammers I wanted, I'd have half of that curvature, twice that radius, if you will. That's too round.
Yeah.
But we're going to press it into surface anyway. A clean anvil surface. say a clean, what's on here? Yeah, there's some spooge on here. Clay, that might be clay. You want the end, got a wire brush? Yeah. The anvil surface has to be clean. Thank you. We're gonna be hammering on this anvil. And every imperfection on this anvil is going to be represented under every hammer mark. Because we're not just, because we're going to squeeze this metal. So, under ideal circumstances, you would pick like the beautiful spot on your anvil. You'd pick the spot that was ever so slightly concave. You know, every old anvil has got a concave spot where some ancient long dead smith beat the out of it right in the middle, and you know the iron underneath the plate is subsided and the plate's cracked. Somewhere near there's going to be a hollow spot. And if you've dressed your anvil down nice and clean but haven't gone all anal and flattened it, you will cherish that spot. I mean, the lesson in there is you want a clean surface but not necessarily a flat surface. You know, an anvil with a little character is more useful than an anvil that's dead flat. So we're just going to hammer this guy a little bit. Going to move around. I like to have, of course I like to have my perfect hammer, and I like to have the light where I can see the hammer marks as they form, so I know where I hit and where I didn't. So here I don't have the lighting situation I want, I'm just kind of guessing. A good strike will not jar your hand. I'm out of practice, I'm jarring my hand a little bit. But a good strike should just like push the metal out nicely underneath, not jar the hand at all. But of course I'm holding it lightly, so if it does jar it doesn't do me much violence. Now the middle's going to have a certain amount of curvature. And it doesn't have it yet. I'm looking across the top here, right? I'm looking at that horizon, rolling it under my eyes. You know, where is it flat? Where is it curved? I need more curve in the middle. So I go back and do some more of the same. A lot of armor working happens with small hammers. You know, it doesn't have to happen with a big old hammer. Some people like to use big old hammers. I don't know why. You know, it's subtle. So some of those kinks are starting to come out, and that's good. Some of those kinks are in there a little too much, and you know, just like lights or something. There's a hole right here. A little bit in there. I'm gonna like work the edges a little bit. I normally don't do much of this, but I'm just trying to kill those dents. The reason I don't do much of this is because this sort of changes the templating. You know, this makes it different from what I templated. But what I am doing here is I'm supporting about 3/16 from the edge and just coaxing the edge down a little. Not to turn it down, but just to continue the overall radius that I want. You know, I'm not really turning the edge down, I'm just like making it smooth. And you could do that by working from the inside until you got to just about the edge, but I don't have like my favorite hammer and I don't want to do it that way. So we're still a little shy in the middle. Yeah. Instead of this one? Won't fit on here without spreading the work. Somebody's got me here. You know, I started to like wander from the shape I wanted, so let me just adjust that shape a little. That kink is pissing me off. Alright, so there's our first approximation, and that's still, you know, it still doesn't have enough curve, but we got a little curve. It needs more curve in the middle than it does on the sides, right? It's you know, the sides are going to be practically flat. The center needs to be curved, and then in between needs to be in between, right? It needs to flow from that flatness to that curvature gently and smoothly. This kind of work, incidentally, what happened on here? This is crazy. crazy. You know, here I'm squatting like a toad to get the, you know, to get the geometry I want.
Welcome to my life.
You know, this guy's a never-ending source of tall guy jokes. He heads us off, you know. He tells us how the weather is up there already.
Full little whack.
Yeah.
Robert,
Yeah.
I'm bringing over a slightly taller animal if you like.
Oh, thank you.
He ain't turning that down.
Okay, now I said that the edges are going to be flat, right? The ends of the frame are going to be flat. That's not, maybe that's not exactly it. It depends on where this lane is destined. Let's say this lane is destined to be here. If this lane is destined to be here, see how the leg curves in here. This lane really needs to be ever so slightly round all the way to the end. Not a lot, but we'll just like, you know, just a little so it rolls into the shape of the knee nicely. Thank you. This edge here, we have this general concavity in the leg. And if the armor is going to fit nicely and cleanly, we want it to mirror that concavity. We want to see that concavity. And this part has to be somewhere between dead flat and, I don't even want to say reflexed, but almost reflexed. So, you know, I'm going to leave it for right now. If I was being fussy, I'd hammer it a little bit just to get rid of the kinks that were in there. But, you know, the kinks are within grinding range. Maybe I'll just leave them. If, on the other hand, this was this lane, we would still want a little bit of flatness or even concavity here, but on this side, we're in a concave place. We've gone from this convex place in this view to a concave place. So we would want this to be, again, dead flat or, you know, I don't want to say it, but almost convex. Just so the transition is nice. So that's probably enough curve to do the job. Can we see the curve on there? It's barely perceptible. That's probably enough to do the job. It's a knee, it's going to have a crest. Crests don't just happen. Crests don't just happen as a last minute thing. They get built up. And of course I would have the cop done already, right? So I can offer this up to the cop and like make sure that I'm putting the crest in kind of the right place. In fact, I would begin like thinking about punching those holes, getting it to work a little bit, seeing whether the crest is, you know, where the crest had to go. But let's say that I've seen that it goes right there. And I need a straight peen. Somebody got a straight peen? Okay. See, the problem is I need to get over, if I'm using a cross peen, I got to get past this, right? If I use a straight peen, I can shoot straight in without any fuss. But we're going to use this. We're going to build up more volume here. This has got to be taller, and it's got to have a kind of a Gothic arch shape as it comes through the middle. And we're going to do more aggressive work. Yeah. Thank you. All right. More in the middle. I got a flat spot developed in the middle there. That's got to go. But no dishing stakes here, right? Or dishing ball. It's out of control, man. Got a clothespin or something? Thank you. I mean, no dishing bowls. It's like, I don't know. It's not the way somehow. Here. Thank you. All right, so that's starting to come into place. I haven't got it straight. I blame it on the lighting and the unfamiliar is. I was making commentary, not request. Thank you. Okay, so now we've got the volume we need here to reduce that crest. I haven't managed to get the damn thing straight, and I'm going to blame it on lighting and the familiar tools. And I hope that you'll just believe me. But at this point, we chuck it back in the top and see whether things are still good, and refine that line that's going to actually be the crest rather than just like the volume of the crest. So now, why are we working from the inside like this? One of the reasons is in that famous woodcut by Berkmeyer, where Emperor Maximilian is annoying the Hofplattner Konrad Schleusselhofer. There's a fellow in the foreground, and he's got a lame like this, and he's beating the inside of it. This tells us that you're supposed to beat the insides of lames. So we have historical justification for beating the insides of lames. The hollow books that you will find, books on silversmithing and coppersmithing, will inform you, with unknown certain terms, that you'll go straight to hell unless you raise and then planish from the outside. Okay, that may be true for silversmiths and coppersmiths, I don't know. What we're effectively doing here is we're getting our volume and planishing in one operation. We don't need to go back to the outside and planish this unless there's a problem. And most of those problems we can take care of from the inside. I see a flat spot right here. Okay, here's the flat spot. I put my finger on it. Why do I put my finger on it? Because my brain knows where my finger is. I go to the inside, I know where my finger is on the outside, I turn this around until I see the reflection that corresponds with my finger. Ah, there's the bad spot. I don't take my eyes off it. I should not have taken my eyes off of it. That's the wrong hammer.
Oh yeah.
But that's the trick. You gotta see it. You gotta see it. You gotta see it with the right side of your brain. This is important. Perhaps I'll go into this in a bit, right side, left side brain thing. But there really is like a differentiation of function within your brain. And the two hemispheres have different functions. They are not necessarily in agreement with one another. The left side will shout the right side down. The right side is interested in shapes, the left side is interested in words and mathematics. They fight with one another. Sometimes you can feel it if you're aware of it. You've got to calm yourself into that art groove. Let the right side of your brain do the thing. The right side of your brain, the left side of your brain says, there's an imperfection, you suck. The right side says, oh yeah, there it is, okay, all right. There's got to be, you got to see it. It's the zen of seeing part of your brain. It's the part that sees and not just like bitches about it. Okay, so I'm going to try and refine this crest a little bit. I need something like a hatchet stake. This is too curved. That looks good. Thank you. And this will fit in that socket? It should. Again, back to the utility hammer with a nearly flat base. I would use something a little sharper than this. Not crazy ass sharp, but a little bit sharper than this. I'm going to lay this to one side, hammer down. I'm going to lay it to the other side, hammer down. Like I say, I've got this crest all crooked, and I'm going to blame it on the tools like all bad craftsmen do. I don't want to feel this blow as being very solid, because I don't want to thin the material under that crest. I want to have a little bit of solidity, but I don't want it to be a thing where the crest works its way through the material very much. And this is going to be an iterative kind of a process where we go back and forth, bringing it down, pushing it up, pushing it down, bringing it up. If I had my druthers and had my favorite hammer, my favorite hammer is for this work, longer neck than this, about half an inch longer, I think, and it's a cross beam in that. But this is the face I use a lot of times. It's a square face, but lightly rounded in the corners, well taken off. And that's like the hammer I use for getting into crests. I use it for getting down into greaves and so forth. I found it at a flea market ages ago, and took off the nasty black painted handle that the flea marketeer had carefully put on badly. Put on the real handle. All right, so that's getting sharper. It's not really sharp. Do we have a slightly sharper stake than this or not?
There's a real narrow one there.
No, it really isn't. It might do the job. It's a funny shape. I don't know what's in this page. Funny shape, but it'll service. It's not going to really serve. I want something where it works straight down. You know, maybe I'm beating a dead horse here. Maybe we'll just move along with something else.
Question.
Yes, sir.
That's a very narrow.
Pardon me?
That's very narrow.
This way?
Yeah, would it matter if it was wider as long as the top of it was sharp?
Oh, no. It'd be great if this thing was like big and tapered into that point, because then you have mass. Yeah, this guy's lightly moves around a lot. Yeah, a big massive thing, which literally would look like a chopping wall or something. A splitting wall would but then build down where it wasn't always cutting through the work would really be a better tool for that purpose. Yes. So this is really embarrassing that this is not coming out as nicely as it should. I guess I should have just brought my damn hammers with me, but I was afraid that if I tried to carry them on, they'd take them from me, and if I tried to check them through, they'd lose them. I guess if I had my act together, I would have nailed them here a week ago, but I didn't. My act is not together. So we're just going to call that a lesson. I would sharpen that crest a lot more if I had the tools that I wanted to have. I would be careful not to hammer straight down on it and force it to work. But I would end up with a line in there. It would be 10,000 deep almost. But I wouldn't go any. I wouldn't let it get any deeper than that. Does anybody have any questions on aside from why doesn't it look nicer? Does anybody have any questions on what I'm doing here so far?
How do you really determine the depth of that crest? How do you know when you're done?
You put it in the knee, you put it in the cup, and you throw it through and look at it. Does it look nice? That's the sine qua non. Does it look nice? If when you flex it, the transition from the cannon or the next lane to the cup looks flat. If it doesn't look nice, it looks faceted, it has to come up more. If it looks bulgy like the Michelin Man, you've gone too far and you need to throw it away and make another one.
Go ahead, sit down.
There's no
Yeah,
hope
go
at that
for it.
point. Because if you try and knock it back down and work hard and get all springy and wanky, it's just easier to cut into it. I mean, you see this didn't take but a couple of minutes, and if I had my familiar tools, which aren't necessarily better but familiar, but it would have taken fewer minutes. So it has to look nice. In a sense, if it looks nice and it looks like a real one, it'll function. Now that does get us in a couple of gray areas as to what is nice and what looks like. And that looks like part is again talking to your brain nicely and getting that artistic Zen part of your brain to not be shouted down by the math and word part of your brain.
Matt,
Yes,
pass
sir.
that around.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry it isn't like nicer looking. Yeah.
In taking it deeper and sharpening it up, are there any other processes you use, or would you just do more of that?
I basically was more of the same, yeah. You know, it would all be just more, you know, lather, rinse, and repeat until it looked nicer. You know, a sharper stake, more familiar tools, better lighting. Lighting is important. You know, you got to be able to see what you're doing at every moment. If the hammer just like lands blindly, the results are going to be crazy.
What kind of lighting do you like? Okay, that's probably natural light.
Fluorescence, banks of fluorescence, and I position myself so that like, you know, the light reflects off the work, and I can see, you know, what I hit and what I haven't hit, and you know, I position myself so the light tells me what's happening. Pardon me?
It's ugly light, but it's contrasting.
Yeah, it doesn't offend me. You know, it's good. It's good for this work.
As an overly left-brained guy, one of the nice things about fluorescence is you've got a linear light source.
You do.
So when you're rolling,
Yeah.
if you've got an imperfection,
Right.
you'll see that straight line
You see the
abruptly
tubes,
bend,
the tubes
and you'll
bend.
go,
That's
oh.
right. That's right. If the fluorescent tubes are bent in the reflection, I mean, if they bend abruptly, they're going to warp in the reflection. But if they take a warp like this, you know there's a dent.
But
Yeah,
when,
it's
you,
true.
when,
I
you've,
do
got
that
it, when
too.
you've got a smooth curve, it's also, I tend to work, like I don't work on rusty stuff, I start with a mirror finish.
It'll
I
work
can.
on rusty stuff. You know, you can see that. You
Yep.
can see the tubes reflected in there.
But if you've got a
I mean,
window,
not rusty stuff, but actually normal stuff. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be polished. Just normal stock. You can see it well enough.
because if you've got a window, you can use the lines of the window.
Just like the cartoon bubbles, you know, with the
It works.
window with the raising the sash where the cartoon character gets out. You know.
Guys, someone's a little too shy to say tulip shape. So
Yeah,
that's
next.
Did somebody say the keyword? Yeah. Okay. So what do you want to see about that tulip shape? There's two parts to that vambrace, right? And they're treated very differently. You want to see
Well, the inner hand.
the inner?
Same thing that we look at the same thing on the back of the green. That's beautiful.
It's not really the same thing on the back of the green. Okay. That tulip-shaped vambrace. You have a lot of convexity through most of it here, and then we throw in reflex at the end. On this side, the shape is dominated by saddle shape. It's dominated by a compound, you know, convexity. On the other hand, you may find a little bit of concavity. Pardon me. You may find a little convexity right here in the close-fitting examples. So there's a variety of things that you might do there. There's a couple of ways you can achieve this. You can achieve this by back raising in, and the work will go very fast. And if you want a very aggressively shaped thing, that's probably the way to start. But it's easy to get out of hand. It's easy to like get over control, you know, out of control and overboard, and have the thing be a caricature of a tulip-shaped vambrace. And sometimes I work that way by starting back raise in here, and sometimes I just flare it. And you can work hot, you can work cold. If you work hot, the work gets done fast, but then you gotta like hang on to the gloves or something. If you work cold, the work gets done slow. It's a lot of trade-offs. You can work a number of different ways.
Sketch one and we'll target.
Yeah, all right. We'll sketch a vambrace door, if you will.
It's on that.
Thank you.
Underneath. Other side.
Other side. Thank you very much. Okay. So what's that length? That length is there. All right. So what's the shape going to be at the wrist? Well, if it was just a cone, right? If it was a conical thing, if we approximate it as a cone, and the wrist cut off straight, then the end of this on both sections would be a concavity like this, and these would be square corners. But that's not the shape it is. It's a more complex shape than that. The wrist is actually cut off at a slight angle back this way because your thumb takes up more space than the heel of your hand. So that would make this just a little bit deeper. Oh, but wait, it's worse than that. Your thumb spends more time here than it spends here. So if this is a left, there's going to be a bias a little bit this way. So like the deepest place is going to be here. And if we're doing the corresponding other part, let's just square that off for a moment. Because the wrist is cut at an angle. If it were cut at an angle, just like and nothing else, this would be convex and these would be square. But again, we have the thing where it's biased. This side corresponds with this side. No, hang on. These will both be outside, then this is these. So this is actually a little shorter than this to bias it a little bit. How much? Not much. And you could almost begin by ignoring that, and then once it's done, grinding to shape, or I mean, you could begin by just ignoring all that entirely, getting it to fit, and then just casting some lines around the trim on. I usually start by like templating it so that it's about the right shape, and then I don't have to do much shaping, much grinding or trimming at all when it's done. But I thought I would like talk about that because it's not the intuitive thing that you think happens here. This side, of course, is going to have a cutaway. Almost everybody makes these too deep. On the real ones, they're much squarer than you expect. They don't have these long, spindly, fragile points. They're pretty square across. These sides, we're going to make them straight. That's not straight, but it should be.
And then just trim to fit once you...
Yeah, we're going to trim to fit. I mean, we'd start with a template, I'm just like winging the template out of my head. But I wouldn't do any of this until I'd done it in cardboard and was satisfied with it. Why? Because okay, I used to be a great armorer, right? But what does that mean today? It doesn't mean shit. How many armors have I built? A couple of dozen. It's nothing. It is nothing. How many van braces have I built in my life? A few dozen. It's trivial. I mean, yeah, I can pull the shape out of my head like this, but the guy who did this all day long for a living, he just breathes that shape. He knows when that shape's right. He doesn't need a template. We need templates because we're not that good. We're reinventing the wheel. We're refining our ideas about our shape every time. We should be refining our ideas about what we're doing every time we make a new one. If you make your next one exactly like your last one, you're not getting better because your last one wasn't perfect. It couldn't have been perfect. It wasn't perfect. We want to strive for perfection. We'll never get there. We want to strive for perfection. We should refine our ideas in between iterations. And in this case, the tool to doing that is templates. Cardboard templates. But that was a digression. I should have done that digression while my sous chef was cutting the piece out.
I'll cut in the middle of all the lines.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I try to be the right brain guy, but the left brain gets in the way, and it makes me make perfect templates and cut exactly down the lines. Because I can't cut it as a right brain guy.
You're just in touch with your right brain, is what you're saying.
What's that?
So you're in touch with your right brain, as opposed to like Patrick Thaden, who is like almost all right brain.
I mean, people are characterized by what hemisphere they sort of live in most of the time.
Yeah.
And
I'm really right-hand dominant.
But Mr. Left Brain, numbers and geometric shapes. Folks who are engineers by trade are almost certainly going to be left brain guys. Folks who are artists are going to be right brain guys. Ugo's a right brain guy. I try to be a right brain guy as much as I can. But art isn't in here. There's no art in here. I do not have an artistic bone in my body. I try to channel somebody else's art. I try to say, what would Conrad Schleifenhofer do? I want to be Conrad Schleifenhofer. I don't want to be Mac, I want to be combat source offer, and that's what I try to do. In the next project, I try to be more in Hemsmead. Unsuccessfully, of course, but that's where I try to put my head. You know, I don't try to express myself because I don't want to express myself. I want to express, you know, home and Hemsmead. Anybody have any questions while he's kindly deburring for me?
How sharp do you want your corners?
Don't worry about it.
Ray, straight down, you raise on
On a ball, mostly. Mostly on a ball. It depends on what the shape's going to be, but if it's going to be something like a helmet, a ball is the place I start. You know, if it's going to be a greave, then a ball is very useful for most things. Thank you.
Hopefully I hit the right part of shape.
No, you never roll the edge before you shape it.
Yeah, don't ever listen
Because
to
you might
Valentine.
take the shaping right to the edge, and then you'd be hosed because there'd be something there. You're almost certainly going to have to trim when you're done. And if you've got edges on there, you're hosed. You can't trim, you can't reevaluate because there's going to be mistakes. Even if the template was perfect, by the time you realize it in steel, things will stretch, and the hems aren't going to line up. The last point is that hems don't bend well. When you try to bend a hem, it collapses. So, and it makes all the shaping more difficult. So no, I mean, it's one of the, thank you, that's one of those things that people like, you know, they think sort of as a first approximation, okay, right, now I'm going to put the hems on, and then shape, but it really is a dead end. Okay.
Also gives you a very modern shape, because when you're doing the shaping with the edge mold, you get that anti-plastic shape.
Is that a leather or a rubber mallet? Oh, okay. Where it's good to be like able to shift in the left-handed. And I envy people who can do that, but they're not very many to do it. This is a pretty heavy hammer. I don't use anything this massive for this kind of an operation, but it's going to come with a handle. The way I'm gripping this, I got the meat of my thumb against here to take the shock. I'm trying to preserve my joints from that shock. I don't have any bony parts against this if I can avoid it, because there is a lot of shock in this. Turns out to be a pretty small one. Your legs are stronger than your arms. Deploy them when you can. All right, just to pre-shape, right? Just to give it the idea. And first approximations go, well, no worse. So, it's got to fit this shape. The moment it's sitting hard on the, this is the radius, it's sitting hard on the radius, this is too short for me. I cut it too short. But we're going to continue anyway. But as it happens, I just made this thing too short for me. But it should, when it's done, be up in my elbow this deep, and this part should be down. In this position here, we should go from like smack up against that tendon, this position, smack up against that tendon to smack up against the wrist, more or less, right? Up against the base of the thumb. So it's an inch too short, even if it didn't, even if it had hems already, it's an inch too short. So another reason to template. When you just wing it, you kind of throw it steel away. So we need to get a shape in here. We can do this two different ways. We can either back raise, which We can push this area down, or we can flare these areas up. We're gonna get subtle here. We're not gonna do back raise. We're just gonna pull it up. We're gonna flare this, and we're gonna flare this. But we're gonna flare it all the way to the edge. As I say, we don't want to. We want to get a little roundness in here, so this like fits in nice and close. So in this area here, we're going to treat it as if it were that knee lane we're working on before. This hammer is too sharp for this operation, but we're going to use it. This is too sharp. It's making these choppy marks. It's moving the metal, but it's not providing a very smooth, grindable surface when we're done. Something with a. You got something? Now, this is too wide. I'm hitting the corners and it's bouncing in my hand. I'm hoping that. This is better. Yeah, this is much better. And again, this anvil, ideally it would be high enough that I could do this without crouching.